Hey students, my name is Spencer. Thanks for joining and hanging out today. For the past few weeks, we've been talking about how our faith can go from being counterfeit, or kind of fake, to being real and personal to us. We've been talking about how our faith can shift from being an imitation of someone else's to being something that we own ourselves. One of the things in life which can sometimes help our faith shift from counterfeit to real is what I call turning points. Chances are you've had a few turning points in your life already. These are the moments that turn our lives around and set us in a direction we weren't going in before. Sometimes they can be positive things like getting your first job, making the school's team, or getting into the school of your dreams for college. Other times they can be more negative turning points, like when your best friend moves away, or your dad losing his job, your parents splitting up, losing a loved one, facing a big injury, or having some close friends stop being your friends altogether. These are just a few examples of turning points that people face. Now take a second to think about a turning point you've experienced in your life. Turning points are often difficult times that challenge us and make life hard. These challenges and tough times have the power to build our faith stronger or completely destroy it if we allow them to. See, during tough times, we have a choice. We can either give in and let the challenges defeat us, or we can turn to Jesus, lean into a relationship with Him, and allow Him to use the tough times to grow our faith and trust in Him. One of the best illustrations of turning points that change someone's faith comes from the life of Jesus Himself. It's described by one of His friends, John, who wrote it all down in John chapter 11. He says this, "Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. These three, Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, weren't just random people Jesus stumbled upon. They were close friends with Jesus. So after Lazarus got sick, Mary and Martha reached out. The sisters sent word to Jesus. You see, they sent a messenger to find Jesus, who was 2, 3, or even 4 days away by travel on foot. Their message said this, 'Lord, the one you love is sick.' Mary and Martha knew that Jesus had healed many people, even strangers. So of course, when Lazarus became sick with a life-threatening illness, they called on Jesus to show up. But things didn't go exactly as they expected. Jesus didn't arrive at their house for a few days, and by the time he did get there, Lazarus had already died. This was kind of the worst turning point that you could even ever think of. So you can imagine how Mary and Martha are feeling when Jesus shows up at their house. Martha leaves her house and goes out to meet Jesus as he approaches. 'Lord,' Martha said to Jesus, 'if you had been here, my brother would have not died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask.'" Imagine being in Martha's position. She just lost her brother. She is angry and sad and wondering why Jesus hadn't been there when she needed him to be. And even after saying all of that, she says something that communicates her trust in who Jesus was. Turning points get our attention. They force us to ask the question, what do we really think God is like? When things fall apart, when things don't go as planned, when things take a turn for the worse, what do I believe about God? Martha, on her worst day in her life, in the worst pain she'd known, decided to trust Jesus, and she experienced Jesus being present with her. Then Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." So Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." Martha believed. She trusted in Jesus, even though her brother had died. Jesus didn't show up in time to save her brother, but her trust in Jesus was still very real. John tells us that after this, Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." In that moment, Jesus felt exactly what we feel when we mourn or our hopes are shattered. Jesus gets our pain. John telling us that Jesus wept is not just a fun detail. It's a sign that we are never alone in our hurt. As bad as things get, Jesus is in it with us. When we get a turning point in our lives, we will always find Jesus in the middle of it. And at the hardest part of the story, when hope seems lost, he's there. And then Jesus does something crazy. He asks Mary and Martha to have their servants open up Lazarus's grave. But at this point, he has already been in the grave for 3 or 4 days, and it probably stunk like crazy. So this was a pretty strange request. But they listened to Jesus and opened up the grave. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you have sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. Jesus brought Lazarus back from the dead. How amazing is that? This is one of the many amazing miracles Jesus performed, which pointed to the fact that he was God in human form and showcased his power and authority over everything, including death. It would be easy to read this story and think that the only point is the happy ending. Lazarus came back, the end. But there's another point that I don't want us to miss in this story. You see, Martha and Mary had to wait for Jesus to show up, and he didn't show up when they wanted him to. You see, we've probably all had moments like that where we waited and we prayed and we hoped and we begged for Jesus to do something, and he didn't. So what then? What does that mean for our faith? That's what we need to remember what Jesus did before he raised Lazarus from the dead. He wept. He was with Mary and with Martha in their pain, and before the miracle, when no one was expecting a happy ending, Jesus was there, present with them in their pain and grieving alongside of them. He was there on their worst day, and he was there when the worst day became the best day, and Lazarus was raised from the dead. The same is true for us. No matter what kind of turning point we are facing, Jesus is with us. If things get better or things get worse, Jesus is there. And when we realize that our faith can begin to grow in spite of our challenging circumstances, we won't always get what we want, but when we realize that no matter what happens, Jesus is with us, that makes for a real faith, not a counterfeit one. Our pain doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be a part of the story, but not the point. It can get our attention, but it doesn't have to destroy our faith. It can even move us closer to God. In fact, that's exactly what this story also shows us. It's possible for our faith to grow, for God to seem more real than ever for us, and for us to see God more clearly in our painful turning point. It's possible to go through the toughest pain possible and come through it trusting God more. Not because God made it go away, but because God used it to stretch you, grow you, and make your faith feel more real and personal. And when that happens, people around us will see God in a bigger way. Just like the people who surrounded Mary and Martha, it will make God more obvious to them. They will see that your faith is authentic, not counterfeit. And as a result, maybe they'll choose to trust God more. The story of Martha and Mary and Lazarus shows us that no matter what we are facing, the worst day or the best day, Jesus is there. And when we believe that and experience that, it grows our faith. In fact, it can even make your faith more authentic than ever. So when you're facing a turning point, ask yourselves these questions. Where is God in this? And how can this tough situation help my faith grow? Remember, this turning point isn't forever. And when it's done, it's possible you can look back and see how your faith became more real. Maybe not yet, maybe not right away, but eventually, even the hardest things can become things that cause growth, because God can use our turning points to grow our faith. The truth is, nobody signs up for tough times. None of us want that, but we all know that eventually it's going to happen. Not because God is angry or mean, but because we live in a world where really hard things happen to almost everybody. It's part of life here. When tough times happen, it can make it hard to trust God, and it can even lead us to question if all this God and faith stuff is even real. That's normal. But I want you to know that even on days when your faith doesn't feel real, if you stay close and choose to hold on, you will find that God stays close too. He promises to be close to the brokenhearted and with us through tough times. Even God can use your tough times, as painful as they are, to make your faith more real, so that the next time you face a difficult situation, you're even stronger and even more confident that God is real and can be trusted. Your group is a great place to talk about these questions, because sometimes we need to hear other people's stories to know that we can make it through tough times. We need to hear from each other and encourage each other so we can remember that God is real and trustworthy, even when it feels like the opposite is true. Today, as you talk with your group, remember this: God can use tough times to grow our faith.